Welcome back. And we finally made it to the Imperfect Women season finale. And if you thought those first 7 episodes were a masterclass in toxic relationships, then episode 8 basically took the wheel from us and drove us straight off a cliff. Which is why today we are going to do a full season post-mortem and we're going to talk about everything in between. But we cannot do that without talking about that season finale, and we're going to break down that ending, the twist, and all the things that led up to it. And honestly, there was a lot of bad detective work in this show. And I understand maybe that didn't help because everybody was lying out of their teeth and they're ultimately covering up this murder. And we ultimately learned, to this group at least, that true friendship means covering up a homicide. And it was self-defense, but let's go ahead and get into it. So let's hit replay on this messy, cynical mess and head into the finale episode. We see that Howard has basically created this alternate reality for everybody, and he is in full control of everything, or at least he thinks he is. And he managed to twist everybody's thoughts to a degree where he even made Mary look like an unhinged stalker and like she was a terrible mother and that she was a danger to her kids. But he does manage to get custody or temporary custody of his kids. Mary is living in a hotel, and the police, for whatever reason, suddenly pivot all their attention on to Nancy's stepfather. And why did they do this? And this is where I talk about this shabby police work. And they did this because they saw him on a dash cam video. And as we learn later in the episode, they don't even really know which direction he's running because he's not running away from the crime. He's actually running towards it. But Scott sits down later in the episode with Mary and Eleanor and drops the truth bomb on him that Nancy had actually called him a couple of times, that she wanted him to basically protect her and scare Howard away because, he wasn't getting the hints that this was over. And then I guess it didn't help that Howard started blackmailing her with her photos or whatnot. So, she wanted him to back off. And the only good thing to come out of that situation was at least Scott was there to, see Howard and see him over Mary's body. So he does know what happened, why he didn't jump the fence to go try to help or see what happened and scare him even more or catch him in the act. Don't know. But hey, he's had problems with the law in the past, obviously. So he didn't feel like going to try to catch Howard in the act was worth the risk, I guess. I disagree, but that's the way they went with this. So let's cut to the custody scene real quick. And the judge basically decides that neither one of these parents, Howard or Mary, are fit to take care of their kids, and they order them into protective custody. And this is when Howard goes into supervillain mode because he shows up at Mary's hotel, he kidnaps her, he takes her back to the scene of the crime where Nancy died, where he killed her. And he's going to stage this suicide for Mary, and she misses her friend and she's taking pills, so she's going to slit her wrist. And even when he was saying this, it didn't really add up to me, and it really seemed like a stupid plan, but he got everybody else fooled to this point, so why not think this will work too? But long story short, while Howard is sitting there doing all his monologuing and trying to figure his way out of this mess, Mary basically tricks him and stabs him and runs off. And who comes to save the day? Of course, Eleanor does, and she runs his ass over with her car, and he pops up on her hood and flies off. But the crazy part about it was when Eleanor goes to check on Mary, Howard pops back up and does his best Michael Myers impression, and he's getting ready to take him out again. But obviously, like in the book to a degree, Mary finishes the job. She kills Howard, and it's self-defense, and then everything is all good now because the season ends with Eleanor moving and we see her on a boat. But we see Mary at her daughter's birthday party. Very nice. But she's with Robert. And then we get that smirk. And it just left me like, what the fuck? Because is she with Robert now? And I guess maybe Robert likes her because he enjoyed the fact that she told him the truth. Maybe he feels seen. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm not sure why they ended it that way. I wasn't very fond of that moment, but it was okay, I guess. What do you guys think about the way the show ended? Because I understand there are a lot of people upset out there about the difference between the way the book ended and the way the show ended. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But I wasn't very happy about the way the show ended, especially with the smirk and the birthday party. It didn't seem to fit the moment. And to end it that way, knowing that this isn't getting a season 2 or anything like that, this is a limited series. It's just one of those ambiguous endings that just kind of leave questions out there, because now we're going to all be talking about, if Mary and Robert are together or not. And it doesn't really matter because we're never going to get to see the product of it, but why? And with that, let's go ahead and talk about some of the Easter eggs and break down that ending of the show and talk about the differences between the book and the show ending. Because I've done some little research and I've seen the forums and people are very pissed off about how this ended, because while the book ending in a show version would have made the show probably a little bit more darker, I think I would have enjoyed that better. And I get why people are kind of pissed off about, especially the way this ended, because the first few episodes, the way it led up, seemed like they were going to go with a version of how the book ended, but then they went and did something completely different. So in the book, Howard doesn't even kill Nancy. Mary's son tracks Howard down because he finds out about the affair or whatnot. So all of that stays true. And he tracks Howard down the night of Nancy's death, and him and Howard get into a scuffle, and Nancy tries to break it up. And Marcus, their son, accidentally pushes Nancy off the bridge. So I guess they kept some of the bridge stuff there too, but why under the bridge? Howard could have threw her off the bridge, could have whatever. So Howard and his son are the reason that Nancy died in the book. And then Mary goes basically into full protective mother mode, and to cover everything up, she overdoses Howard on those pills, and basically that's how that ends. So I guess that was her way of protecting her son and avenging Nancy at the same time. So that's how the book ends, or that's what happened in the book. So the show, with Howard actually killing Nancy and him being this mastermind and deception, it was fun, but I think I like the way the book ended better. And that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Would you prefer the show ending, or would you prefer the book ending? Or would you maybe have preferred a combination of both? And I guess we kind of got that because they kept the bridge stuff, they kept the pill stuff, they just used them in different ways. But I see why some people are upset, especially the book readers, that the show played out a little bit differently, because it did set up in a way where it could have played out the same, or they minimized Marcus so much in this show where, yeah, we learned that he does know about his dad's past affairs and stuff like that, but it doesn't seem like he knows about the one with Nancy. And they didn't really do Marcus any justice. They kind of washed his character to a degree and made him a background character, where it seems like in the book that he's more of a, not necessarily a primary player, but he definitely has more to do with the actual story. And I can see why people are upset, because they're changing the story, and I get it. It's just like this year with all these damn sequels that are coming out. And are there not any more original ideas, or can we just leave the original source material alone sometimes? So I get where you guys are coming from and why you're upset. And the last thing I do want to talk about is that final shot one more time, because it just makes me ask the question of, do we all feel like Mary was a victim the entire time? Or was she a victim at all? Because it does seem to a degree that if we really look at this, like Mary may have systematically somewhat designed all of this, because we saw glimpses of the show where she was writing a book and doing her little book club thing or whatever the case may be. But maybe Mary systematically arranged all of this so that she could inherit the life that Nancy had, because that seems like what happened the way the show ended. So maybe this was Mary's plan all along, because Mary was the major player in the book, covering up the crime, basically, killing Howard, protecting her son. So maybe this was the TV show version of her still gaining everything and nothing really falling on her. Because we can't lie, if she is with Robert, in comparison to Howard, she definitely leveled up. So how did this season stack up as a whole? On an execution level, I feel like it did very, very well. Those middle episodes kind of dragged a little bit, while they were very informative and gave us a lot of information, and it kind of pulled us into the show as well, especially episode 4 or 5, I can't remember, the one titled Nancy. But I think that episode 8 paid off the slow burn perfectly. No, I didn't like the way it ended, and I think it could have been done differently, or even maybe closer to the book. But if I'm just judging the show as a whole, I do think it was done very, very well. Because if you look at the tension under the bridge and the way it was lit and the way the show looks, it's all very nice and it's very, very well shot. So if we're being honest, everything was really, really good. We had incredible performances from all the actors involved, and there's not a lot to dislike about this show, except for that absolute trash that they call cop work, because that was some bullshit. Detective Ganz and the whole police station, they just need to be fired. They locked in so hard on individual people, but never looked at what everybody was saying when they were saying that it was Howard. They never checked his emails. They never checked his text messages to see, well, you know what? Let's just do our proper investigation. And I just don't understand why that was missed. Was it done on purpose to make the police look dumb? Did we just not want to involve the police too much in the story? That was a low point for me because I didn't understand why there was just such poor police work. Because while we have this super villain guy, it actually would have made him a more credible villain since they did the show this way and changed the book ending. It would have made him a more credible villain if the cops would have actually been on him and he still would have been getting away with it. That would have made Howard this ultimate TV show villain, but that's not what they did. So with that being said, I would probably give this show as a whole a 4 out of 5 or 8 out of 10, however you want to look at it. Very, very good show. Some missed opportunities, but I can't complain about it as a whole. And I'm curious to see where the book readers would rate this. I would, from the discourse I've kind of seen, I think they would probably lean maybe between more of a 5 or a 6 out of 10 or a 3 out of 5 or something like that. It doesn't seem like they were very pleased with the way this ended. And I understand because it was different. But let me hear from you all down in the comments and tell me what you think about this show and what you think about the book if you've read it versus the show. Let's see what everybody feels and which ending you would prefer, because kind of knowing what both endings are now, I think I would prefer the book ending, if I'm being honest, because it just seems like a more psychological, twisted way to go. And that would have been more my flavor. While the show was good, I enjoyed it. It did drag in the middle. It could have been a little bit better, but can we really complain about watching good content? But thank you all for coming. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and I will see you in the next one.